Hello. Welcome to Dan Explains It All. Today we're here to talk about float. Float is a filter pedal. Float has two filters. There's a lot of control, and all of it is based around one thing: motion. You have envelopes, you have LFOs, you have various filter voices, you have control over the range of the motion, you have control over whether it's in stereo or mono parallel or series mono. There's a lot to it. So it's probably best if we just dig in. Let's start with one mono filter. By plugging into in one and out one, we have one mono sound. We're going to focus on the left side of the pedal here. That's filter one. There's a control-labeled cutoff, a control-labeled rate, there's sensitivity, volume, resonance, shape, and all of those are repeated for filter two. Right now we're just going to look at the cutoff control. First thing, I want to deactivate the LFO. By turning rate all the way down, the LFO will stop moving. Next, I want to deactivate the sensitivity. It's actually already off, but just to show you, you want to point it at the 0. So what we have now in float is a fixed filter, and it's attached to the slider labeled cutoff. Because the toggle is set to low pass, only frequencies below that cutoff can pass through. As I turn it down, you get the sense of loss of volume because there's so few frequencies left. As I turn it up, it opens wide up. If I move the toggle to band pass, only frequencies around the cutoff will pass through. Right now it's a lot of highs that we don't really have. Then we'll pass through some higher mids, and eventually some lows. Finally, you can set it to high pass. In high pass mode, only frequencies above the cutoff will pass through to the output. So all the way up, there's nothing left. As you turn it down, you get more and more mids and lows, until it's basically wide open when it's all the way down. These are the basic filter sounds, the building blocks of everything float can do. While we're here, we'll take a quick look at the volume and resonance controls. I'm going to switch back to low pass. With our cutoff frequency somewhere in the middle, volume is a straightforward volume control. I turn it all the way down, I lose all signal. I turn it all the way up, I have a nice boost of that low pass. Now, resonance is an effect that can be sort of thought as like feedback of the filter. Basically what it does is it enhances and intensifies the frequencies around the cutoff frequency. With no resonance, it's a very smooth sounding filter. As you increase resonance, you hear a particular band of frequencies start to really poke through. And that's all based around, again, where your cutoff frequency is set. I'm going to dial resonance back to just a hair. So again, that's the sort of basic building block filter. Let's go ahead and set it in motion. Earlier, I turned the rate all the way down in order to deactivate the LFO. So now what I'm going to do is start to turn the rate up. Now, right now it's really slow, so we could be here for a very long time waiting for it. Let's go ahead and crank it. There we go. So that's it's a pretty fast LFO. I'm going to go ahead and dial the speed back a little bit. There's a lot of sort of fast and medium rates, and then when you go below noon, that's where you get really slow ambient motions. So we'll keep it pretty high so I can describe it to you. So basically what this LFO is doing is moving the cutoff frequency up and down. It can do it in a lot of different shapes. So right now we are on the triangle mode, but with this shape knob, I can click into a sine wave, which sounds fairly similar to triangle. It just sort of hangs out at the top and bottom slightly longer. It's more of a feel thing. I can set it to square. Now you'll hear it just move between top and bottom. I can set it to one of the sawtooth waves. Whoever remembers which one is normal and which one's inverted. But what this one does is it starts at the top, ramps down to the bottom, and then skips back up to the top. Then I can move to the next one, and it'll act opposite. So it'll go down to up, and then plummet back down. So you have that constant rising sense out of it. And finally, there's a random shape, or you might call it sample hold. Basically, this, at the same rate as the other LFOs, will just move to different random spots between the minimum and maximum. And so you can you always know when it's going to move, but you never know where, which is a lot of fun. Maybe now we should talk about the min-max toggle. I'm going to switch us back to triangle. And this is one of the things that's a bit unique about the motion in float, is you can set the range by choosing the minimum cutoff and the maximum cutoff. So when our LFO moves, it doesn't just move between all the way down and all the way up. You tell it how far down it should go and how far up it should go. To set the maximum, you simply move the slider. That's what we've been doing this whole time. To set the minimum, there's a little toggle switch down here that's actually momentary, so I can pull it in one direction, and then when I let go, it goes back to max. But when you hold it towards min, it allows you to set your minimum value. So let's say I don't want it to go all the way down, I only want it to go about half the way down. Set the cutoff about halfway, let go. So now you have a much subtler motion. It's moving between all the way up and just about halfway down. Since the toggle is now set back to max again, I can move it up slightly. And we'll go ahead and crank the resonance. And you can hear how now it has a really limited range. It's undulating a little bit, but the overall signal let through is fairly similar. It just gives a slight motion to the signal. So the min-max toggle affects both the cutoff frequency slider as well as the rate knob, but we'll get into how you can use it for the rate in a little bit. Let's go ahead and deactivate the LFO. So now we're back to that fixed filter. Wherever the maximum is, that's where the filter lives. Go ahead and open it all the way back up. In fact, we'll go ahead and max it out entirely. A little trick if you want to have your minimum all the way down and your maximum all the way up, just go all the way down, back all the way up. Essentially, as you try to set the maximum any lower than the minimum, they'll just drag together. So you don't have to worry about really understanding that. It's just a quick trick to get the full range out of your motion. So now we're going to look at the envelope element of float. That's all attached to the sensitivity knob. Basically, as we start to turn sensitivity up past noon, we're going to engage the envelope. And depending on the strength of your signal, it'll move toward the maximum cutoff frequency. So it starts at wherever you set the minimum, and then when you play loudly enough, it goes to the maximum. Now, you can reverse that operation if you go below noon. So now it moves downward with the strength of your signal and then comes back up. And basically the further away from noon you move, the more reactive that effect is. So it increases sensitivity in the positive direction or sensitivity in the negative direction, and that sensitivity is how much it reacts to your signal. So if you go all the way, it'll really hang at the bottom most of the time because it just needs a little bit of signal to do it. Or in the opposite direction, it'll hang up top most of the time. But if you let it hang just for a second, there it is. Very sensitive. We don't need that much sensitivity, but it's available. Turn the sensitivity, the envelope section back off again. I think all that's left in terms of talking about an individual filter is the way that the envelope can directly affect the cutoff frequency, but it can also directly affect the rate. So what I'm going to do is activate the rate, turn it all the way to maximum. Okay, maybe I'll back it up just slightly. And I'm going to set my minimum rate a little bit below. Basically, I don't want the minimum rate to be totally bottomed out, just a little bit slower than where we are now. So I'll hold minimum, and then I'll set the rate, let's say here. We're going to find out where it is in just a second. So you're still hearing it at maximum rate because our envelope is deactivated by putting sensitivity at noon. But if I bring the sensitivity knob up from there, what'll happen here is the strength of your signal will speed up or slow down the LFO, because now that our LFO is active, it can be envelope reactive. I'm going to bring the minimum speed up a little bit. And you know what, let's go ray gun mode. So now we can just dig in and it'll go super fast. It's a lot of fun. And I could, again, limit the range of motion of the filter itself. So that way, even when the rate gets super fast, it doesn't totally bottom out or totally top out. It's a subtle motion that's very reactive to the dynamics of your playing. So that's pretty much the range of possibilities with half a float. That's how one filter works. And there's an entire second filter. So let's see what they can do together.
Smell the pollution, man.
I feel like we're finally coming home. I mean, wherever that is. So the way we're plugged in right now, with just our input into in1 and our output out of out1, allows us to use the two filters in parallel in mono. So to engage filter 2, simply hit the foot switch. Now we can use all of the controls independently. For example, if I just wanted to hear filter 2, I could turn the volume all the way down on filter 1. So now we know exactly what's happening on filter 2. It sounds like it's a fairly wide open LFO with no envelope reactivity. Blend them together, and now we hear that filter 2 is still moving with consistency, but the filter 1 is getting affected by the envelope of the signal. So that's basically parallel. I'm going to show you one fun sound real quick. I'm going to set filter 2 to be a band pass. I'm going to limit the range of each, but not to exactly the same ranges. And I just really like the way that the band pass kind of cuts through the low pass when their resonances are close, and it becomes almost like a phaser or a harmonic tremolo, or it's tough to read exactly, but it sounds really nice. So one note about when these filters are in parallel like this, filter 1 becomes the primary on-off. I turn it off and both filters turn off. I turn it on and either both filters turn on, or if filter 2 isn't engaged, then just filter 1. But one of the ways to use them fully independently from each other is actually to wire them in series. So in this case, filter 1 would go into filter 2. And for that, we just need a patch cable. There we go. So I'm going to take our main output and plug it into out 2. And then patch between out 1 and in 2. The exact same filters, but notice how now the sound is totally different. Instead of getting added together, you've got this low-pass filter then being processed into a band-pass filter. You can still hear those kind of familiar motions of it. There's a lot of different ways you can use this. You could even just make it like a fixed dual filter. Let's turn all of our motion off. Shave off some of the highs in filter 1 and shave off some of the lows in filter 2. Just treat it like a tone shaper. Thanks. So those are all of the mono routing options for float. You've got the parallel mono and now series mono. But we could also use the two filters separately in a true stereo setup. Let's hear it in true stereo. What if we do two totally separate signal sources? We'll take our patch cable out first. Now we're going to do two outputs. Perfect. Another input. So now we have two different signals. One is passing through filter 1, the other is passing through filter 2. You can play with a friend. You can do whatever you want. What if they were both low-pass filters, moving at, slightly different rates? It's nice. It's true stereo. It's a way to hang with your friends, whoever and wherever they may be. I guess maybe we could also check out mono to stereo. So that's where you just plug into input 1 and route out of both out 1 and out 2 for a true stereo filter setup. Basically, filter 1 will go one way, filter 2 will go the other way. So now we've got the two different filters on different sides of the stereo spread. We've talked about pretty much every control on float, but one thing we haven't addressed yet is the sync toggle. The sync toggle can be used to sync the motions of filter 2 to filter 1. So if, for example, filter 1 is enveloping filter 2 will follow that same envelope. If filter 1 has the LFO active, filter 2 will follow that same LFO. And it'll be not that the cutoff frequencies are directly linked, but just the rate of motion. So go ahead and put on your headphones if they're not on already, because I think we want to hear this next part really hard panned. So I'm going to engage the sync toggle with our sensitivity off and our rate, our LFO active via the rate knob on filter 1. Filter 2 is linked, but can be subdivided. So if I turn it all the way down, you'll hear that their rates are totally synced, 1-to-1. We'll make them the same shape so you can really hear them. Go ahead and go exactly the same motion across both. I could also turn up the rate knob and make filter 2 twice as fast, or 3 times as fast for that galloping triplet feeling, or even 4 times as fast, which if we make rate 1 really fast is almost a ring mod, because why not? So one of my favorite tricks to do with this is actually to sync them exactly. Set both of the shapes to random. So now we have 2 low-pass filters. Each can go all the way down or all the way up based on where we set our minimum and maximum. They're moving at the exact same rate, but they're not matching their frequencies. So basically they each move at the same time, but to a different random spot. So that's kind of the fun of this in stereo, is that if you are on headphones, you have 2 amps hard pan, it's as if the sound is moving throughout the room, and all you've done is taken one mono signal and applied different filters to it. So that's the LFO part of syncing. We could also do the envelope by deactivating our filter 1 LFO and engaging the filter 1 envelope. So now the sensitivity control on filter 2 basically tells you whether, I'll set my shapes back to triangle, and we'll talk about that in a second. So the sensitivity knob, when they are both linked, basically says if you put it above noon, you want the filters to open up together, the envelopes to be exactly linked. Or you could set it in the inverse direction. So the envelopes will be linked but inverted. So as your filter 1 moves upward to maximum from minimum, your filter 2 moves downward from maximum to minimum. And again, there's a lot of sounds you can coax out of this basic functionality, but you know, we only have so much time here together, so I just wanted to move through the controls. But again, on that shape knob, I just wanted to make a quick note. The envelope will actually follow the shape that you have selected. So in a triangle, or to a certain degree sine, or sawtooth or ramp setting, it'll feel quite familiar. It opens up in a fairly linear way. But you could also do a square wave envelope, where basically, if you get over the threshold, it skips to the maximum. And when you go over halfway, you know, basically the threshold can be thought of as this midpoint. And if you cross it, it snaps to the top. And when you're below it, it snaps back to the bottom. You can also make it random, so that every time you cross over the threshold, you hit a new random spot. And then when you dip below, you get ready to cross over again and hit a new random spot. So as you're learning your envelopes, maybe start with triangle for a clear linear motion, but then have fun with the other shapes. So those are all the controls that you see here on Float, which really just leaves us with one more thing to address, and it's external control. You'll notice there's an expression jack on the side here. The expression can be linked either directly to the cutoff frequency or to the rate. Let's go ahead and plug in an expression slider so we can have some fun with that. Now the first thing we have to do is assign expression. So you have to decide whether you want for each filter to control the cutoff, the rate, or nothing. So what we're going to do first is hold both foot switches until the LEDs do a little dance for us. So now we're in expression calibration mode. And again, all you need to do is pick which control you want to access. So I'm going to go ahead and control both cutoffs at the same time. All I have to do is wiggle one and then wiggle the other. If I wanted to control rate instead, I just wiggle that control. Basically, you do a little bit of motion so that Float knows, that's the control you want to set when you're moving expression. So you can do rate on one, cutoff on the other way around, cutoff on only one and leave the other one unaffected. There's a lot of stuff you can do. So I'm going to go ahead and, again, just wiggle each cutoff slider so that we can attach it directly to the frequency. I'm going to exit calibration. So now you can directly control the cutoff frequency by simply sliding your slider or letting it slide on its own, whatever the case may be. And one of the fun things about using expression with Float is that it doesn't simply move between bottom and top. It moves between minimum and maximum of either your rate or your cutoff control, whichever you've asked it to control. So again, I could do different ranges. Let's make the minimum over here, about there, make it not a super wide motion, and then make the motion on filter 1 much wider. So you can just kind of get different effects by having the two controls move together but not over the exact same range of motion. So that's expression in Float. There are some other let's say alt settings that you can change while you're in that calibration mode. First, let's talk about the envelope attack and release. Basically, in Float, there are two different possible envelopes. One is your kind of standard, let's say, quacky envelope filter, and that's going to be on filter 1 by default. The other has a much slower attack, so it reacts much less to your initial strength of signal and almost builds over the course of time. Okay, so let's first hear the difference between those two sounds. So we're going to turn the volume on filter 2 all the way down, turn the volume on filter 1 up. So now you can hear that familiar envelope attack that we heard earlier, where it reacts pretty quickly to your motions, and especially as the sensitivity goes up. It can be very fast in its attack and fairly fast in its release as well. Now with those same settings over on filter 2, I'm just going to turn the volume down on filter 1 and bring it in on filter 2. You can hear how it's still reacting, but not with that kind of quacky, fast attack. My rate was still activated because I only just turned the sync off. But now you can hear how the envelope will open up. You know, the filter is opening up, and especially if you play a really big chord and let it like ring out, you'll start to hear it open up a little bit more, but it's not going to have that really fast motion that you associate with kind of the classic envelope filter sound. So that's the difference in sound between those two styles of attack. And you have access to both of them in both filters. So let's go ahead and I'll show you real quick how to set it. So again, you're going to hold both foot switches. Back in calibration mode. To set the style of envelope, you're going to hold min and move sensitivity. If you move it above noon, it's going to be the slow attack. And if you move it below noon, it'll be the fast attack. So now both of our filters should have the same fast attack, slower release. now they'll act the same. Or you could have them both do the slow attack. It's however you like to set it. So that's it. That's float. It's a filter pedal, technically, but kind of feels like something else entirely. It's available direct from oldbloodnoise.com for $299 and at participating dealers worldwide. It runs on 9-volt power, draws about 100 milliamps, the usual stuff, you know, true bypass when it's off, all those things. Any questions?
Yeah, and we're out. Yeah, that was great, guys.